Hey everybody, it's me again. So today I'm going to be trying something a little different. Most of my other videos, they've all been kind of video essays about movies, TV shows, and music. Today I'd like to about and rank the movies in probably my favorite franchise, the MCU, and just kind of give you my tier list. Just trying to mix up the type of content I'm making. So anyway, let's just jump right into this. I should say before I start, I love the MCU. I love just about every single film in the MCU. So even the films that I'm going to be putting at the bottom tier, I like these movies. They're just some of them are clearly better than others. That being said, my least favorite MCU film, there's only one in the bottom tier for me. It's Captain Marvel. The reason why is, well, there's a few reasons. It kind of being a prequel, it undercuts kind of the mysteriousness, especially the character Nick Fury. I don't think you really had to do a whole background story on him. I liked him kind of being this mysterious shadow figure. It kind of undercut that. Plus, it just led to. I think this is the only movie that the MCU is worse off because it just creates so many plot holes with having a character this strong who's been around for so long. Why didn't Nick Fury just call her in the first Avengers film? Why didn't they wait for her to return in Avengers Endgame? It just doesn't make sense. Plus, the plot's pretty basic. I don't think the character's all that relatable. There's no real deeper themes in this movie, so at the time I'm gonna leave her at the bottom. Next, you know, the next movies are the Thor movies. The first two Thor movies. So The Dark World is probably my least favorite of the Thor movies, followed closely by the original Thor. I think these were the weakest of all the well, first Thor movie was the weakest of all the Phase 1 kind of intro movies. In both these movies, even though I like the character Thor here, he wasn't all that funny compared to what he became later on with Ragnarok and going forward. Also, I feel like he was kind of overshadowed by Loki. So, I like these films. The supporting cast is okay. Natalie Portman doesn't really feel. She doesn't have a lot to do in them, so I'm going to leave them there for now. Next, I'm going to go with Ant-Man and the Wasp. Now, I love Paul Rudd, super funny character. I think he adds a lot to kind of the comedic aspect of these movies. However, it's just not that unique, the plot. I kind of feel like they set up this whole great kind of moral dilemma. They could either save Ghost or they could save Hank Pym's wife. And they kind of had to choose one or the other, but in the end, they ended up copping out and they ended up saving both of them. So it kind of undercut that moral dilemma, which it kind of made the movie. It didn't completely ruin it, but it took a lot of the. It just made it less than what it could have been if they had to make a real tough decision. So I'm going to leave that there for now. Next, it's another movie that, again, I really like this movie, The Hulk, The Incredible Hulk. But because they recast the character, it's pretty clear that Mark Ruffalo's better for this role. It doesn't really feel like an MCU film. Kind of basic plot, just something we've seen before. So I'm going to leave it here for now. Nothing super great. I believe that's all for this column. Going up, I'm going to go next with, I think, Iron Man 2. Now, this is a film that a lot of people love to hate. I don't think it deserves all of the hate, even though it's clearly not great. So, the best part of this film, like all the Iron Man films and a lot of these MCU films, is Robert Downey Jr. He's just great in everything he does. He's hilarious. I love the backstory with his father, Howard Stark, in this. That eventually would culminate in what I think was one of the greatest scenes in Endgame, where he got to see his father again. So I like that, but generic bad guy is not. It feels more like it's setting up Avengers than trying to be its own thing. So I just leave it there. It doesn't fully have the deeper themes like the first Iron Man movie. it had criticisms of the wars in the Middle East and Afghanistan, the military-industrial complex, all that stuff. You didn't see that here. So I'm going to leave it there. Next, I think I'm going to have to go with Age of Ultron. This movie was hyped up so much, it just didn't live up to the anticipation. My favorite part of this film, though, which is something I still think was one of the best scenes in the entire MCU, was the scene after kind of the first fight sequence. They're at a party. They're all trying to lift Thor's hammer. It's nice to see these characters interacting with each other and kind of goofing around. Because in the end of the day, what makes the MCU work is there's these characters who we've been following for close to a decade. And it's nice to see them kind of interact with each other. You see that they really care for each other in this film. However, that for me is all that really works in this film. It feels like a movie that the stakes aren't that high. The bad guy's not going to win. That it's just kind of setting up Avengers Infinity War and Endgame. It's not really its own thing. It does introduce some good characters, especially Wanda Maximoff, but this isn't her best performance here. So, gonna leave that there. Next is the original Ant-Man. Again, like I said with its sequel, I love Paul Rudd, hilarious here. The plot feels like it's very, very much just kind of copying the original Iron Man. Hank Pym, to me, feels just like an updated version of Tony Stark, but just not as good. The plot's nothing to write home about. It's okay. Very funny, though. Probably one of the funniest entries in the MCU, though, so pretty middle of the line film. From there, this might be a little more controversial, putting it this low, but I wasn't as big of a fan of the second Guardians of the Galaxy film as the first. I'm not a huge fan of excessive CGI, which I think this kind of is guilty of. I understand this is a film that has a lot of bright colors, supposed to be visually pleasing, but for me, in certain areas, it kind of missed the mark. However, again, I love how the best part of these films, the Guardians of the Galaxy films, are, the cast of characters. That was every bit as great as the first one, so very solid entry. Next, I think that's it for this tier. I'm going to move up now. Next one is probably Iron Man 3. Now, this is a movie, again, I do not understand the hate for this film. This is one of Tony Stark's, Robert Downey Jr.'s best entries in the franchise. I guess people don't like it because of the whole Mandarin subplot, which I understand if you're a huge fan of the comics, might be annoying. But I love films that reflect real life. They kind of reflect the time period in which they're made. So at the time this film was made, a lot of veterans are coming home from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. They're dealing with issues, especially PTSD, and in this film it feels kind of very reflective of that. You see Tony Stark, who dealt with a lot. He was in Afghanistan. He kind of saw these things firsthand, and he's having a hard time coming to grips with that. And that's what it's a great character story. You see him kind of evolve throughout the film, kind of learn who he is. And I love films that deal with, character development and themes through these character developments, which I think this kind of does both. So, great film. Does not deserve the hate it gets. Next, Spider-Man Far From Home. Now, my favorite Spider-Man will always be Tobey Maguire. But he is not as funny as Tom Holland. He's not as good at the one-liners as Tom Holland is. This film, I do think it gets a little too CGI-y at parts. Not a huge fan of those crazy visual effects. But great cast. It was really nice to see how he dealt with the death of his mentor, Tony Stark, and how he kind of got over that. So it's a great character story. So that's there. After that, I think I'm going to have to go with the first Guardians of the Galaxy film. Admittedly, out of all the films in all of the mini franchises within this larger MCU, the Guardians of the Galaxy were never my favorite, just being honest. But the best part of this was seeing the team come together, seeing all the characters, and it's a very funny journey. So I think this one's a little better than the first than its sequel, but definitely not top tier. Very solid though. From there, think I'm gonna have to go with Thor Ragnarok. Again, I love this movie as it's the film where you really saw the shift in Thor from a more serious character to a more comedic one. Taika Waititi did a great job of kind of completely turning this character around and making him likable. Before, he kind of came off as this Shakespearean character who is less interesting than his younger brother. Here, he clearly eclipsed Loki as the 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 best character in this film. So I love that. However, it has its flaws. Again, I know I probably said this a million times already. I'm not a huge fan of CGI. It's a little overboard on that sometimes, a little cartoonish, but it does have great themes. There's criticisms of current immigration policy in here, which I know people can debate forever. But I love films that kind of reflect the times they're made in. And I think that this does this very well. Okay, next I'm gonna have to go with Spider-Man: Homecoming. This was a movie I was very skeptical about because I loved the original Tobey Maguire films. I was very disappointed with the Andrew Garfield ones. I didn't know how they were going to do this for the MCU, but they pulled it off. It was a great coming of age story. You see him, Spider-Man, the best Spider-Man movies at the best show kind of the difficulty. They're about the responsibility that comes with growing up. And I think this movie does this very well. Yeah, you see in one scene he has to decide between, going to the prom with a girl he's had a crush on or stopping the bad guy. It's a very hard decision, but in the end he makes the right choice. And even though they don't say the words, here with great power comes great responsibility, you still feel that theme throughout this film, which I love. So I'll put that there. Plus, there's Robert Downey Jr. in it, which is always a plus. From there, I'm going to go with uh, Captain America, the First Avenger. To me, behind Iron Man, the second best character in this franchise is Steve Rogers, Captain America. This film, even though it's not as good as its sequels, it does a good job of setting him up as, it's like in underdog stories. He's this tiny, weak guy, but he gets chosen for this experiment because he clearly has, the biggest heart of all the people in his program. And you see him kind of it's nice to see that the super loyal, super patriotic guy is able to finally live up to his potential. And it's nice. It's even better in the sequels how they're able to kind of take that dynamic and flip it on its head. But I'll get there in a minute. From there, I think I'm gonna have to go with probably the original Iron Man film. Now, this is the film that kicked off the MCU. It brought us the MCU's best character in Iron Man, Tony Stark. It also, like I said before, has deeper themes of, the wars in Afghanistan, kind of the issues with that there. And, it's a great character study because in the beginning of this film, Tony Stark really isn't a likable guy. But it's nice, it shows how, after being forced to confront what he's been a part of, he kind of turns that around, and it's a great start for his story arc. So I'm going to put that right there. After this is Black Panther. I know a lot of people would want me to put this in the top tier, and I get that kind of impulse. However, the while the first act of this film was great, It was great to see Wakanda, all that stuff. It felt, especially in the third act, a little over the top. There is just horrible CGI rhinos in the bad third act final fight sequence. It doesn't. I think that holds it back from being one of the greats. So I can't. The best part of this film was the lead, T'Challa, Chadwick Boseman. But other than that, the cinematography I don't think was that great. I'm not a huge fan of hip hop, so I didn't really like the soundtrack. But that's my personal opinions. Everyone's going to differ on that, so I'm going to put this film right there. Next is Doctor Strange. What I love about this film is how it kind of has themes of, you know, reason and logic versus faith. One of my favorite TV shows of all time was Lost, and I loved it for just that reason. In this film, you see Doctor Strange. He's a scientist. He's a doctor, and he's forced to confront things that to him seem unscientific, and you kind of have that dilemma go on. And I really appreciate, even though I'm not a huge fan of CGI, I think it was done well here. The effects, so it was done in a way that really didn't feel super unrealistic, like I would add in, like it did in kind of the third act of Black Panther. So really solid entry here, Doctor Strange. Now, final on this list is the original Avengers. This was the film where a lot of people thought the MCU would kind of collapse. It wasn't really the MCU yet. It was just a bunch of individual character films. There was the original Thor film, Iron Man, Captain America, Hulk. But this was the film that managed to bring them all together, and people didn't really know how that would play out. But it turns out that the team really did well. They got along real well. They all of the main cast had great chemistry, and it shocked everyone when it worked. However, it wasn't quite as good as some of its later films, I would add. So it's not top tier. Next are the final four. Now, if it should be obvious at this point, I'm a huge fan of the Russo brothers. Obviously, the last four remaining are all Russo brother directed films, and I'm going back and forth between which of these I think are best or and worst out of the four. It's hard to say that. It's really hard for me to pick, but I think of the four in the top that are going to be in the top tier, probably my I honestly have to say I think these four might be tied for me as my favorites. Let me first talk about the last two Captain America films. What I love about these. So, in the first Captain America film, you see him kind of become this patriotic, loyal character, loyal to a fault. But then here you see that kind of flipped on its head. He's brought to the present, 75 years later, and he sees the government doing things that are clearly violating people's freedoms. And it's interesting because, first of all, what I love about it is it seems like in the first Iron Man film, it set up Iron Man as more of a, I guess you can say, politically liberal character arc, anti-war, anti-military industrial complex, all that stuff. Here you see Captain America kind of being set up with more of a conservative, libertarian, small government philosophy. The idea that, he's a lover of freedom, and now he has to see, he's watching as his government is essentially holding a gun to everyone's head and saying it's for their own safety, as he would put it. And it's cool to see how he kind of deals with that. It really kind of adds to the whole man at a time aspect. And that's a theme that you see. It starts in Captain America, the Winter Soldier, when obviously Hydra is trying to create their helicarriers that can target people wherever in the world or anywhere in the world. And it continues in Civil War when you see with the Sokovia Accords and the world governments trying to essentially control and regulate the Avengers. And it's great because it sets up kind of that conflicting character arcs between the two most important characters in the MCU, Tony Stark and Steve Rogers. So I really loved how they did that. They really managed to make this character, who a lot of people think was kind of stiff and boring, really relatable because they took his basic convictions and beliefs, his love for country and freedom, and forced him into this real moral dilemma, which there is no real easy way out of. And again, it's very reflective of what was happening when these films came out with the Edward Snowden NSA whistleblower scandal. So I just love those two films for that reason. Then there's the Avengers Infinity War and Endgame. Infinity War, I was a little nervous about. Because they kind of, well, they they had built up Thanos for so long, and everything we had seen from him so far really wasn't great. He wasn't great in Guardians of the Galaxy. His post credit scenes with him in it weren't. They didn't make me feel any better about him. But what I loved here is how they made him. I was really afraid he was going to be one dimensional. He was not, and the way they did that was something that I wasn't seeing coming. That I did not see coming, rather. It was through his relationship with Gamora that they managed to kind of show why he's doing what he's doing, how he thinks what he's doing is for the best, and why. And it really felt like Thanos was the lead of this story, which I loved. And the ending was just amazing. Again, the Russo brothers blew this one out of the park, hit this one out of the park. It was amazing. Then there's the finale. The finale of the Infinity Saga, I should say, at Avengers Endgame. Again, I was a little nervous about this one, but after seeing Infinity War, I think I knew that the Russo brothers had it. Like they could easily handle this. And they did. What I loved about this film was it felt like a tribute to all the previous MCU films. There were so many nice references and Easter eggs in here that just it felt like it was just honoring this entire franchise, which they had built up so much. Everything from the elevator scene where Captain America, said "Hail Hydra," to when, the on your left scene, or when Captain America was able to lift Thor's hammer. It just worked so well. I was a little scared about the time travel aspect, but I think they did it in a way that really worked. They couldn't essentially undo their past, which I was happy about. And I think it was the perfect end for this franchise. I think everyone, Tony Stark die. He obviously, spoiler alert, he dies in this film, but he does it in a way where he sacrifices his life for everyone, which was great. Captain America got a happy ending. Everyone got, I think, a decent ending. It was very satisfying. So that's why these are my top four. So this was my first time making one of these lists. This was also my first time doing doing a video that was completely unscripted. Usually I have some type of script written out ahead of time, and sometimes I'll deviate from that script a little, but when you listen to this, just kind of bear with me. Or hopefully I didn't annoy you too much with my stuttering and stuff. I'm not super used to this yet. And also let me know what you liked about this video, if you like this new format. Also let me know if there's any other tier lists or movies you want me to talk about, or tier lists to do, I should say. Anyway, well, thanks for liking, comment. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, I should say. And I'll see you guys next time.